Does that guy doesn't know how to take a cue or what?
No.
They're finishing up. You're two
Yeah.
minutes earlier. You're 2 minutes
Oh, am
very,
I?
very prompt. Usually everybody. I don't think anybody's ever showed up early. Like literally, we get all these guests. Conan's never early. We
I,
always
I,
like
I
Conan's on
try
the
to be.
yeah.
I
Conan's on the
try to be.
15-minute delay.
Yeah, he
We
made
always
it
have
today
to
though.
say, yeah, oh, you're right.
I'm
You
on
did make it
Mexican
today.
time.
Yeah,
He
right.
made it before you.
Yeah. But it was funny too, Eric, when I used to drive when I would drive Conan, Ray, and Hoovy. Okay, and I was, back then there was always a couple guys we'd map out the trip, like we'd have everything, so I'd be the driver, right? And I would have to like shoot, do the thing with them. I would tell them, okay, let's leave at 7:30 because I wanted to make sure we left at 8. And
No,
they would smarten up to it, and they would literally start showing up an hour late. Like at 8, then I would just say like let's leave at 7 o'clock. So I did like a bump it up an hour because they would never show up on time. It's unbelievable.
Right. There was never any time that we were going to get on time if you gave a Mexican a ride. And the other thing was, I remember one time Tigers decided to travel with us. Remember that?
sure.
Yes.
Uh,
Right.
and
Yes.
we were taking forever, bro. And she was getting pissed off. And Ray was the last one to come out. And she was like, "Hey, what's up?" And goes, "That's how we roll." He just kept walking. That was hilarious.
Right. Let's get.
But how you doing, Eric?
I'm well, my friend. How are you doing?
Good. I saw you doing this little Prince Nana dance. What was that about?
Yeah. Yeah, about 700, over 1 million people have seen that as well.
Really?
The only
Wow.
thing I've done in a
The
while.
weirdest thing, right, gets over.
Yeah. No, we were just doing our regular podcast, and Conrad likes to, rib me every once in a while. So he said, "Hey, what do you think about the Prince Nana dance?" And to be honest with you, I was like, "The fuck is a Prince Nana dance? I don't even know." And then he showed me a clip of it. I went, "Oh, I can do." He challenged me. He goes, "Hey, I want you to do that." I went, "All right, I'll do it." Bam, bam, bam.
Right. Right.
Next thing I know, I'm a
Well, you
viral
had
sensation.
a lot of rhythm for a white guy in a prone
I
position while
know,
in a
especially an old
what
white
seems like a
guy,
log cabin. Yes, that was great.
especially an
Yeah,
old white guy in a treehouse. Yeah.
that was great. So, let me ask you a question. So, right now, is there anything that you're doing, like business wise, or anything that's satisfying to you that fills up your time? Like, what are you actually doing? Because I haven't seen you anywhere like in the wrestling industry.
Yeah. No, I still do appearances. I've been really busy this summer. I've probably done more personal appearances since the first of the year than I've done
Are these like one man shows or autograph signings or both?
one-man shows, autograph signings. I go to a lot of just independent wrestling events and play, GM for the night, things like that. I enjoy doing that about once or twice a month. It's about as much as I can take because travel's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I've been working on a gaming project, broadly based gaming project, for about 2 years now, and we are in deep discussions with significant players in that business. But I don't like to talk about it much because it's a long way off. A million things can happen
Right.
between now and then.
Right. You
I'm
end up
pretty
looking
excited
like you're
about that.
talking out the side of your neck. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's a life changing event if it all goes well. But who knows? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I've got things like that I keep myself
So let me
challenged.
ask you two questions about these one man shows. I'm sure there's a million questions you get asked over and over and over again. But is there a question that has been asked to you lately that you had never really been asked before? And you're like, wow, I never thought about that.
There have been. We do Q&As on the podcast every once in a while, and certainly in the one-man shows. I can't really pinpoint one for you, but it happens
Right.
not very often, because you do
Right. It's
get
always the
asked.
kind of the same questions, right? Right. Which is kind of funny because it lets you know, okay, these people are all thinking the same thing, yet they've never heard me say it before. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
and
there's always
sometimes
something that's always on somebody's mind, you know?
yeah, and sometimes they're kind of at their core they're the same questions, but they're asked much differently, sometimes in a different context.
Right.
So,
Right.
And another thing, Conan, is sorry, Eric, is that when Eric and Conrad do a show, for example, they'll always advertise it as, "We'll say things you won't hear on the podcast." So if people are asking repetitive questions, it probably just means that either they didn't hear it get answered or they want a juicier answer kind of thing in person. You know what I mean? So I think that's
yeah, a
cool.
lot of times people, and this doesn't happen often either. And I actually appreciate it when it does because it gives me something to react to. Otherwise, I'm a little fucking boring. But when somebody asks a question and they know it's a smart ass question and they know the answer to it, and they also know how I'm probably going to react, but that's actually what they want to see. They want to see me react. And hey, they paid their money. I'll put on a show. I don't care. I'll dance.
Right.
So
let me
go ahead.
Can I, before you ask this question, Ron, one quick question, because we always talk about wrestling here, right? But I love to talk. I love to delve with you into other subjects. So this is kind of an abstract question, but I wanted to see what was your position on this. Are you a guy that when you hear conspiracy theories, like you believe most of them, or are you a guy that takes them like, okay, this sounds plausible, let me research it. This doesn't sound plausible, I'm not even going to get into it. Like what how do you stand on that?
Broadly, I think anybody has to be a little careful about thinking anything is a conspiracy theory, because a lot of the conspiracy theories from 18 months ago, for example, or 2 years ago, have proven to be fact. So I typically don't write things off just immediately as a conspiracy theory. Some of them are obvious and it's easy to do, but more often than not, if it's a theory or something that somebody posts or publishes and it sounds a little wacky, but it gets my interest, then I'll start digging. I never rely on one source. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, anything, any paper in America. They're all tabloids. They're all competing with TMZ.
So what's your
read or see in corporate media?
Right, we're the same way. So how's your when you're going? Since you don't listen, what do you listen to, or how do you research it? Do you read something then cross-reference it, or what do you do?
I'll cross-reference it. For example, the whole COVID thing is still very interesting to me, not only because it was such a devastating disease that caught everybody flat-footed, and because it was an engineered virus by most accounts, including many of the federal government's accounts. So that interests me because I'm always interested in how does these things happen? How could something be manipulated, exploited, turn into a profit center while being forced down the world's throat? How does that happen? And I'll start, Joe Rogan has had a number of guests on, like Dr. Peter McAuliffe, for example. He is an expert in that area. There are several others who are. Edward Dowd is someone that is a financial analyst who's looking at the entire phenomenon of how this country reacted, in the world, really, how we all reacted to this COVID virus, but he's basing it on financial actuaries, both in the medical universe and the financial universe. And when you look at somebody that's breaking things down from an actuarial point of view, meaning just numbers, folks, no opinions, no spin, these are just numbers.
Right.
It tends to make me pay attention to that person. So I'll listen to their podcasts, or I'll follow them and read their materials. And then if they bring in guests that either agree or disagree with them, sometimes I'll find somebody who disagrees with someone that I tend to believe a little bit, and I'll dig into them and find out why they feel that way, and try at least to make my own evaluation.
Let me ask you this. What's your take? Because I'm not. I never really listened to the show, but I've seen clips and stuff. But what's your take on a guy like Alex Jones? Because the thing that piques my interest with him is that he was kicked off social media. But then I'm like, you go back and I'm like, this guy's been right about a lot of things. I know he's been wrong a lot. I know he had the shooting thing that he got in trouble for, but it's like, this guy kind of been spot on about a lot of stuff, but they're still suppressing him off the platforms. That piques my interest.
But
why are they doing that?
Well,
but even
I think Alex Jones is on the outside looking in and trying to reestablish himself now on social media, because I think largely because of what he was suggesting in one of the mass shootings,
right.
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook, and some of the things he said I found to be. I'd slap him up if he lived down the street from me. I'd just walk down the street.
And the worst thing, Eric, what really killed his credibility is that on the stand, because I followed this, on the stand, he kept denying it, and they kept asking him a different way until he finally said, yeah, I knew I was wrong. And then they had people that worked for him that were saying, hey, we were telling this guy to quit doing it, and he didn't care. But bro, according to his wife, he was getting fucking paid. Like, he was making $100 million a year, some god awful number like that, and then saying that he was broke. So, and he was there in front of the family members saying, yeah, this didn't happen, they were actors. And I'm like, what type of person would do that? But continue. I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, because of that, though he may be somewhat right about some things, it doesn't matter to me. I wouldn't listen to a syllable or read a sentence of anything that he had to say or write.
Right.
Is there somebody, Eric, and we're kind of contemporaries in age, like, back in the day where you had the Walter Cronkite and the Harry Reasners and, those type of broadcasters, that they had a lot of credibility. Is there anybody to you that has some inkling of credibility?
Not in terms of corporate mainstream news anymore. Absolutely not. There are writers, there are investigators, there are people that are out there digging for the truth, and they end up being guests on different shows. And some of those people I find credible, and I'll listen to what they have to say, and I'll research it if I'm interested. But for the most part, I don't.
Any names you want to throw out there? Because I'm interested in stuff like this.
I mean, nothing I can pull off the top of my head.
Right.
I don't follow them enough and religiously enough to remember them. But there's a small handful, and when I see them pop up, I'll pay attention, because to me, when I've listened to them, they're credible. They back up what they say with real information, and they don't spin things. But as far as is there a face of a news network? Is there a Walter Cronkite today?
No.
No.
Of course not, right?
No.
They're all just out.
How weird is that, right?
They're doing what we did, Konnan and Disco, in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
You've got baby faces and you got heels, and they're out there doing their job to be performers. Right. It's all performance art.
Who do you find credible in the wrestling media?
That's going to be, I'm going to get bitch slapped for my opinion here, because everybody's got one, and they're so touchy about it. But I believe Dave Shearer. I believe Mike Johnson over at PW Insider.
Dave Shearer, is that the one from where Wrestling Inc?
PW Insider.
Him and Johnson are both PW Insider.
Okay. Yep. If they print it, I believe it, and I don't dig too deeply.
What about you? I like Jason Powell.
Same thing. Right there. Jason Powell is a stand-up, straight-up dude. I find Sean Ross Sapp. I know he's controversial. I know he gets out there and he punches back, which stirs up a lot of shit. But I'll listen. I'll tend to believe. I may do a little research, but I think he's a very credible guy. I think his intentions are very, very credible.
I would like to call him that, but you don't get the DMs from him where he just basically kind of insults me all the time and everything.
Everybody insults you all the time. That's
I know. Right, exactly. I got a question, because I want to be more knowledgeable on this subject than and you're the perfect guy to talk to. Now, it's funny, like how when AEW came around, they started, like, the rest of the TV rating metrics changed. All of a sudden, Dave Meltzer started highlighting the demo, okay, and like the demo was the key number and stuff and all that and everything. But I always looked at it as, like, over the course of history, we always judged a show on how well you were doing by whether or not the total amount of fans were either increasing or decreasing on a weekly basis, or month to month going up or going down, and like that was a number, right? And they really kind of brag a lot when they get a good number. Okay. And I was like saying to myself, well, all that really means is that the numbers for them is that they have a resume to present when their rights deal comes up, when they're going to renegotiate it. And that's just basically part of your resume. On a week to week basis, the company's not making any money off the TV ratings. Now, what is the difference right now? I don't know if you know this or not, but I'd like to know if you do, or if I can find it out. What is the difference between, like, the ad rates, like the money that advertisers get charged by the networks to advertise on, like, the WWE programming, on Fox USA, as opposed to, like, the WBD programming? Do you have any knowledge of like what those numbers are?
Yeah, a couple things. I just want to clarify some context here.
Okay.
Demos have always been important. It's not new. And advertisers have always, when I was in the business, active, that demo was critical. The reason Nitro became so successful was due in large part because we targeted an 18 to 49-year-old demo while WWE was targeting teens and preteens. And the advertisers coveted that 18 to 49-year-old demo, and the WWE ignored them for the most part because they were very successful targeting towards teen and preteens. That's where all the merchandise came from, right? And that's where a lot of their revenue came from. It was a different business model, but it's always been true. The overall rating, because they correlate. You know, the more people that are watching your show, the more of a percentage of that favorable demo you're going to have in it. So it's not like it's new. It's discussed far more now. All of a sudden now that's the topic of discussion because two reasons, I think. One is because as streaming has become more dominant, as that has put pressure on cable and terrestrial television, traditional television, because now there are ad dollars being spread over platforms that are not necessarily part of the traditional television platform. So it's gotten more competitive. And as a result, advertisers have focused more on the demo, perhaps over the last 5 or 10 years than they did previously. That's why demo talk has become more of a subject because advertisers talk about it more. When you read Adweek, for example, all they ever really talk about are demo numbers, not gross numbers, because that's the subject of conversation in that world. And then it trickles down into wrestling. And as much as I can't stand Dave Meltzer, I certainly don't want to be the guy here defending him. I think he's a piece of garbage, but he's not wrong in focusing on demos.
Like,
So
go ahead. Sorry.
well, so the second part of that, do you know, like, are advertisers, like when that does the advertiser, like the networks, are they charging ads? Like, are they like buying ads for like a month, a year, or stuff like that, like a set price, or is it depend? How does that work?
Here's, I can tell you how it used to work. I don't know how it works now because I haven't done it in a while.
All right.
But you've heard the term upfronts, right? Cable
Right.
upfronts, network upfronts. What the upfronts really are is an opportunity for networks, cable and traditional, terrestrial, to go to the big advertisers and the big advertising agencies and say, here is our lineup for the year, hoping to get advertisers to make long-term early commitments for some of that prime real estate. All right. It's a sales pitch is all it is. Those are the upfronts. But when the upfronts are over, because they only last for a short period of time, a month or two, I think it was what it used to be, usually in February or March, is when the upfronts traditionally were. Cable came somewhat after that. But once that period was over, there was still a lot of advertising space available. They didn't sell it all out during the upfronts. So then you had a period of time when there was still advertising, but it was maybe less attractive. Maybe they weren't the big hit shows. Maybe those were previously all sold out. So now as an advertiser, you're getting into the second tier, third tier, fourth tier of content that you can advertise your product in because you didn't make that big upfront commitment early on in the year. So you have a period of time where that a certain percentage of that television advertising is available on the market. Then as you get later on in the year, it used to be called scatter, I think, where it's basically, here's what you got. We'll give you a discount on it. It kind of sucks. We know this is not the best of what we have, but here's what you could buy. It's like opportunistic buys. You know, people that don't really have huge ad budgets, they can't compete with the General Motors or the Coors or the, you know, the whatever, the Mercedes-Benz or whatever. They can't compete with that kind of money, but they still want to promote their products. So they buy that cheaper, less attractive advertising later on in the year. And now the other part of your question was, how do they look at wrestling versus other content advertisers? You know, wrestling has always suffered from the perception of it's wrestling. Therefore, it's not the kind of product we want to be in. It's why you haven't seen any really high dollar advertisers promoting in wrestling. High dollar, what do I mean by that? I don't know, General Motors, for example, or any of the car companies typically don't.
Eric.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just thought of this and I don't want to forget it. So why do you think if we've had so many names in the wrestling industry that everybody knows from Hogan to Macho to Flair to The Rock to Cena, and we can go on, that we still don't get that respect because of some of the content that they still watch?
It's the nature of the content. It's
Right.
and part of it is, unless you're a wrestling fan, and a lot of the people that are buying advertising and dealing with advertisers are not wrestling fans. They're just
But I'm
representing.
sure you met, but Eric, I'm sure you've met, as I have, when you're talking to executives, they're like, "Oh, Sting works for you. I remember him. Hogan worked for you. I remember him." Like you didn't get any of that.
Oh, sure, you get that, but that doesn't mean they want their product associated with you.
Okay,
There's still
good
this
point.
perception that it's big athletic guys and girls, in tights in a performative act of violence. It is what it is, folks. You
Right.
can't pretend it. Now, we all know it's much more than that. It's acting, it's performing, it's writing, it's directing, it's great camera work when it's done well. There is so much more. It's the athleticism, the understanding of psychology, and getting people to react. In many ways, I think professional wrestlers have been undervalued and underrecognized in their ability to create the kind of emotion that a lot of screen actors probably can't, or at least not as well. But
Right.
it's still about, if you're an advertising agent or an agency and your client is Mercedes-Benz and they have a $10 billion advertising budget, even though you may like wrestling and you remember Sting and Hulk Hogan and you used to watch it when you were a kid, you loved it, are you going to go to an executive at Mercedes-Benz and say, "Here's where I want you to spend your money"? Because inherently, most people in that universe of people kind of look at wrestling as wrestling. Are you kidding me? I mean, everybody recognizes, because of WWE, frankly, it's much more mainstream. It's much more acceptable. It's much more palatable to a lot of advertisers than it wasn't in the past. But there's still a lot of advertisers that don't want to be seen in it. It just is what it is. It's the nature of the product.
I find this fascinating too, because when Russo came to WCW and started doing that, like the edgy, let's throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks, and it kind of got risque and stuff, right? And all of a sudden, we were having standards and practice at the show. We got to put the thumb down on the stuff thing. Bro, are you shocked today? Like when you see the blood, and the gore, and the cussing and everything on that product, sometimes I'm shocked that like it gets that they allow it so gratuitously on the WBD on the Turner networks.
Yeah, I do. I do, because that's a big change. I was under a lot more pressure back in 1995 when things it was much more Wild West in many respects in terms of the world of entertainment than it is now. Things have actually gotten, in some ways, have actually gotten much more conservative today than they were in 1995. So that does surprise me, because the psychology has changed at the network, which I find interesting. Where it surprised me the most, though, is because if anything is going to turn off an advertiser, it's that. I mean, that screams lowbrow kind of basement television to me from an advertising point of view. And I know some fans love it. I'm not criticizing people for enjoying that as a consumer. But from an advertiser's perspective and an executive's perspective, it makes placing an ad, which is already risky to begin with because it's professional wrestling and not everybody's kind of bought into it. But now you're asking an advertiser to put their investment in a show that's gratuitous in that regard. And I just think that's a business decision that I really, really question.
And you know what's kind of fun?
One is a taste question. Do you really like that? Do you really want to see that on your network? The other one's a business. The other one's a business decision. Is that the best thing for your potential advertising community?
Well, let me tell you what's
Real quick,
kind of ironic
Konnan,
about that.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying. I just want to tell Disco to check his text messages. So that's all. Go ahead. Sorry.
So what's kind of ironic is I'm working in AAA in Mexico, right? So we wanted to have this hardcore match, and like my boss was like, "Okay, just so you know, The network doesn't want, blood. The advertiser doesn't want you using thumbtacks. This guy doesn't want you using this. And there's been also a societal change. That's why it's weird that they let them get away with that in AEW. And you know what it reminded me a lot of? I remember the time you called me into your office and you were like, "Yeah, SMP." And I was like, "What's that?" "Yeah, standards and practices." What exactly? What does bow down and toss my salad and peel my potato? What's that supposed to mean? "Oh, it's just a saying." You were like, "No, that's not just a saying. You can't say that anymore." Remember that? I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember. And Konnan, you know what's funny?
Yeah.
Just like I came to you and said standards and practices, and you looked at me and said, "What the hell is that?" I
Right.
said the exact same thing when someone else came to me and said, "Hey, there's this lady by the name of Terry Tingle, which is the best stripper name in the world." Terry Tingle.
Terry Tingle.
That is a stripper name. Like, I bet you there are strippers somewhere in the country that heard her name and took it. But when the
Maybe.
first time I heard of a division in Turner called Standards and Practices, I went the same thing you did. So what the hell is that? And why do I
Right.
care?
Yeah.
I found out why I cared.
Let me ask
So,
you
yeah,
this.
yeah.
What was going to say? So me and Coney had a conversation on this show recently, and we were referencing when like a comment that Tony Khan had made in the past, where he was saying we're not going to make the same mistakes that WCW made. Like
Oh,
he's made a lot of comments that I'm offended with you for like a lot of comments he made. Like especially like when Meltzer said like Tony Khan, oh he's way smarter than Eric Bischoff and stuff, and that just gets me, right.
well, he
So
might be, by the way. It doesn't
yeah,
take much.
but right. But I'm just saying this was a conversation I want to have with you. I find it interesting that they're in second place right now by a wider margin than previously, right? And they say they don't want to make the same mistakes, and everything, but the one thing that WWE and you always capitalized on is when there was legitimate heat and we turned it into business. You and Flair, you turned it to business. Brett and Vince, everything. There's so many missed opportunities that AEW is passing by to take like real life heat and not capitalizing on it at all, to the point they're almost ignoring it, don't want to talk about it, nobody discusses it. Somebody that's like it just evaporates into the air. It's like you had a spot here, and it's like it's happened a lot of times. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, it's complicated because in order, Rick, I'm going to use Ric Flair and I because I kind of have an inside track on that one, it involved me.
Right.
A little.
Right.
I don't have to call it from the sidelines. I liked Rick. We had always been friends. Our kids hung out together at Disney MGM Studios. We partied together. We had fun together. And then to end up in kind of a head-to-head, pretty ugly, very public, legal situation with someone that I considered a friend was not a pleasant experience at all. And when it was over, I still respected Rick. I still wanted to work with Rick. And I think Rick, once he got over his issues to the degree that he did, I think he still holds on to some of it. And that's okay. He's got his reasons. But at that point, once it was over, we both looked at each other and went, all right, what do we do? Pretend it didn't happen, or let's have some fun. We had fun, but that's chemistry and willingness and trust to a degree, because now we have to take all of that real life heat, repackage it, throw a bit of gasoline on it, and hit it with a blowtorch every Monday night for a couple of weeks when the issues are still a little bit raw. But I think for us at that time, that made the most sense for both of us. I think now, and especially for Tony, look, he's still new at this. I say he's learning on the job, just like I did, by the way. In many respects, I was learning on the job, and so is Tony. I think Tony has a greater aversion to real heat than I did, or I do. I love freaking heat. I'll run into the fire, and especially if I can make money doing it. I'll seek out fire if I can make money at it. Whereas I think Tony, and I've heard this from a number of people, I don't know if it's true, but based on what I see on television, which is not a lot of real heat, maybe he just wants everybody to be loved and have fun. I don't know.
That's impossible.
Oh,
You know, he wants to look at the world through rose-colored glasses. Nobody talk bad about promotion. Nobody criticize, bro. Anybody that's in any form of entertainment or content or anything, you're privy to criticism. You know, if not, get off fucking social media or go hide in a closet somewhere. Not everybody's gonna like you, and that's a part of life. But I just found it very weird because, for example, like when you had your heat, you challenged Vince McMahon to a fight. Okay, the guy supposedly, from what I understand, I don't know if you know more about this than me. I guess the only reason he didn't go is he had to go to a wedding or some shit or something like that.
No,
Like,
Graduation.
Stephanie was
Graduation.
graduating from college on that
Right.
day, which was a Sunday, which I find really fucking interesting. I don't know how many people have college ceremonies. on
right, but he's
Sunday.
like you. He likes weed. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you know what I'm saying? Like Vince is like you. He likes heat. He welcomes heat. You know what I'm saying?
Vince likes to fight. Vince is a fighter.
Right. Right. So like Tony, when I was reading that the Young Bucks were saying, "Oh, we got NBA level contracts," I was like, "Well, why didn't Tony, before he gave those NBA level contracts, sit them down with Punk and everybody involved and said, before I give you these massive raises and you stay as executive vice presidents and you have your own dressing room and all the perks that you have, okay, you guys are going to sit down and you're going to do business." You know what I'm saying? And let's take advantage of this.
Well, again, that's a strong leadership role, because you're kind of telling everybody what you want them to do because they
Right.
work for you.
Right.
And that's not always easy, particularly when there's
Nowadays,
real
it isn't
personal
always
issues there.
easy.
But the only way that you get there is by taking a firm leadership role. And I don't know I don't know what Tony's leadership style is or isn't.
But would you disagree with this, Eric? I just feel, because even like when you had a problem with Eddie back in the day, you guys fixed it and you turned it into an angle. I think back in our day, we were more willing to put things aside for the betterment of the business, where now your feelings matter more than the business does. That's kind of what I get.
And again, there's an example. I was on the inside track on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a moment. We had heat.
Right.
And we both
Right.
recognized that we were probably both wrong.
Right.
We both handled it the wrong way. All right. Well, now what? Let's have
Right.
fun. I mean,
Right.
it's how do you take
That's
it?
my point.
Are you going to carry that shit around for the rest of your life and hold a grudge and not do business?
Right.
Or are you going to look in the mirror and go, yeah, I could have fucked up that and I could have handled that better. And all right, now that I admit that, let's go make some money. It's just how you approach it.
Right. I just think that anytime you got it, I've always thought that the most interesting storylines are in the dressing room. And when you bring them to the forefront, especially if people kind of know about it, it takes on an extra sort of dimension or gravitas. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it does. And like Disco was saying earlier, there's been, the MJF meltdown, that was one that could have gone somewhere creatively. Now they patched it up and now they're working together. They're collaborating. MJA's off on it. He's on his own rocket ship. He's doing really well. He's got an extremely bright future. That ended very well for both Tony and MJF, but they chose not to use it as a creative platform. Okay. Right. That's fine. I would have done it differently, but it turned out good. So who am I to criticize? On the other hand, the CM Punk thing and the Buck thing, that unfortunately for everybody, including the fans, was a huge, I don't want to say missed opportunity, because there's no opportunity there if the people involved aren't of the mindset, for whatever reason, to look at themselves and each other and go, okay, we could have handled that better. Now let's move on and make some money. Or no, I don't want to. It's just how you do it. It's where your head's at. And I think your self-confidence to a degree.
Yeah. Plus, like I said, you miss the potential for a surge in the business, which is good for the fans and everybody,
And you know what else it does? Yeah. It makes it a lot easier for everybody to get over it. Right.
And here's the worst part of all.
Ric Flair and I went from arguing and fighting and, saying horrible things about each other to turning it into an angle and then having a beer afterwards. That's a good outcome.
By the time you and
go ahead. Let me just finish this real quick, Joe. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing to me is that the fans miss out, because I had a wrestler a day before the biggest show of the year try to pull out. right? And I was like, bro, you could be mad at AAA, you could be mad at me, you could be mad at this guy, but don't take it out on the fans.
Right.
You know, this is bullshit. You know, thank God he fucking did it. But the fans are the ones that are missing out on this great new different thing that could, you know, help in the ratings. What were you saying, Joe?
So the thing with Flair, I mean, the fans and the wrestling media, whatever, became aware of it mostly when Flair didn't show up at that Thunder in April, and he was you know, away from the company till his return in September. You guys got in the ring in December at Starrcade. So some time had passed. Did you have any concerns getting in the ring with Rick that it might turn into, you know, we might have to throw a couple of real punches here?
No.
No.
That's where the trust comes in.
Right.
I have never, ever been in a situation. Now I've outside of the building, there's been a time or two I may have seen my life pass before my eyes for a brief second. But, you know, once I stepped to I absolutely 110% trusted Rick. I wouldn't have, the thought of something stupid happening would never have even entered my mind to think about how I would react to it if it did. Same was true with Steve Austin. Look at all the supposed heat Steve and I had.
Right.
No.
And what didn't Steve say something to you before you guys went out to the ring where basically he was giving you the heads up, like, I got to throw him, you know, I'm going to be throwing some steam at you. Yeah.
Oh, I knew that. He didn't have to tell me. I'd watched him work for quite a while.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So me and let me just ask Eric real quick. Disco and I have a bet, $100 wager between us. Now I say Punk will return to WWE, and I have until the end of next year. And Disco just says it's never going to happen. So what do you think about that bet, and which side would you take?
I would take your side before I would take Disco's side.
So
Only
you think,
because I just don't believe never, ever happens in professional wrestling.
Sure.
And
all you guys, I don't. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
And I was just saying anything. So much like if you ask me, do you think he'll be there? You know, in the next three months? No. 6 months? No. But once you go beyond 6 months, it all depends on what happens in the television market, right?
Right.
If the numbers are solid and continuing to grow the way they have over the last year and a half, I think it would be just very unlikely because there's no need for it.
Right.
But I guarantee you, if those numbers take a big dip and there's pressure on the company to do something to energize the market again, and somebody brings up Punk's name, I would not bet against that. Business is business.
I'm not going to disagree with that. But my take is that, like as you said, it's just common sense. What's the risk reward for this guy right now? It's extremely high risk. They don't need to take the risk right now. Like WWE,
I don't think there's any risk involved because Punk's not going to be able to pull into WWE and even remotely have an opportunity to have a repeat performance of what went on in AEW. That's just not going to happen.
But I would say that, but he got sent home. He comes back after 6 months, and it's like it didn't even take long for the problems to happen again. So my thing is, like, I don't know if that leopard can change it. If he can change his spots, that's maybe the.
It takes a strong leader to sit you down, read you the riot, and tell you, bro. Eric read it to me a couple times with Scott and Kevin,
and it didn't do any good.
But we respected you, you know. And at the end of the day, you know, if they come up to me and go, hey, we're not. You pull any shit, any of your backroom politics, any of your bullshit, you try to do you're fucking out of here. This is your last chance. You're lucky you're getting it. And bro, if he shows up there, if he just shows up there and just says, you know what, I got a lot to say and I'll say it next week. Imagine what the rating will be next week.
And even look, I've been pretty vocal about CM Punk. I don't dislike Phil Brooks at all. I don't know Phil Brooks. We've never had a conversation, and he's never. I have no issues with him. I have a big issue with the way he handled himself and some of the things he said to try to get himself over. I think he showed his ass to me a little bit as a professional, but I believe he's got to be a relatively smart guy. I believe that. And you go into WWE, it's a different world there. And not only if he shows up and cuts a promo like Konnan suggested, think of the backstory potential that's there as a result of the previous tenure he had. There's
Right.
just story you could create, some of it based on reality, some of it just made up, but still based on his time in WWE. So the backstory and the creative platform there could be really good and be very effective if the individual Phil Brooks is willing to perform as the character CM Punk within the parameters of WWE. And it's a much different environment. I just don't think he could or would pull the same kind of stunts.
You know, not that
and-
it makes anything official at all. I don't know. You guys may have heard this already, but he returned to do his commentary for the UFC's like feeder promotion. It's Cage Fury or something. And on commentary, he's like, "Yeah, I'm glad to be back, and I'll be around because I do have the next 2 months free." And he's hinting at Survivor Series is in Chicago in November.
Could be.
Maybe I'll be. And
Or he
he's
could be trolling.
He's probably just having fun, but yeah, he did say that.
It's funny. We were watching, like me and Konnan. We watch all that. I don't know. You don't watch all the shows each week, Eric? Do you, by any chance? You don't.
No.
Okay.
No,
Well, we watch each week, and because we review, because our fans like to review the shows, right? And like it's funny because like one of the criticisms we have are from like production standpoints, like a lot of the segments, there's very awkward outs. Like the ending of one segment, it's like overlap. There's like guys are talking and they just cut him off and stuff. And then I'm watching, and I'm like watching, like how does this happen? And I found out recently, bro, they don't have production meetings. And
Tony,
I was fascinated when I heard that. I'm like, how does that happen?
Oh yeah, you and I tweeted about that because
I messaged you. Because you were.
You DM me because of
when they did the countdown 5, 4, take 22, and like you were like you tweeted, how does this happen? And I messaged you. I said they don't have production meetings, and I'm like, that's how.
What else is really weird? And I was sitting in Philadelphia at a DoubleTree Inn while that was happening. And I'm going, oh, this is weird. And I said, like, immediately, as soon as I said it, how did this happen? And then the more I thought about it, the more confused I got, because the only time you do a slate is when you're doing interviews that are going to go into post-production. So you can keep track of those cuts, right? It's for editing purposes.
Right.
Why the fuck are you doing it on a live show?
There was some speculation, DI, that it might be some kind of story, but nobody knows yet, So I don't know.
What's the story? That production's an idiot?
I don't know. If somebody is fucking up, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
That the producer's
I think
an
that's some
idiot.
half glass full bullshit right there.
Right. Oh my God.
He ain't
When
afraid to ride the fence.
When you were not at all. When you appeared for AEW, I think it was 2 or 3 times, something like that.
Twice, I think.
Was it twice? So there's no production meetings, but who spoke to you and approached you and kind of delivered to you like, hey, this is what we're looking for or whatever?
Cody and Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho the first time, Cody the second time, or vice versa. I can't remember.
Okay.
You know what, Eric, was funny? When I sat in, when I went into booking, I sat in the production meeting for the first time. I got I was watching you, right? And I just kind of had, again, this was in 99, I guess, right? Or I got the feeling from your body language, the way that you were just like very frustrated with the production. Like a lot of things were like there was a period of time there where it's just like you were like you'd be like, oh, like you'd grown, and you'd say something, everything. Were there like, how was your relationship with production? Did you go through stages there where they weren't delivering what you wanted, and you would like? Did you ever have like any like conflict with them, or like?
No, for the most part, my relationship with David Crockett was very good. Some of the vendors we use, like Jeff Bornstein for lighting, I had a lot of respect for and always got performance out of. Keith Mitchell, when it was necessary for me to interface with Keith, I always got along great with Keith and had a ton of respect. Craig Leathers, the director. Was there frustration? Of course. It's live television. There's always going to be frustration, and I'm sure there were a lot of times in production meetings when I was basically just there because I was supposed to be, because I had that much confidence in the team to do what needed to be done at that point. It didn't need me or my influence. But there were times, especially in 99, as things started getting really bad, where there was a lot of frustration. And a lot of that had to do with communication breakdowns and things like that. But it was never directed at any one person. Generally, I got along with production really well. I admired them.
I do remember one time you were really frustrated. And I don't know what year this was, Eric. And you told me, he goes, I'm going to go with my daughter. I don't know if it was your daughter or your whole family, but, and I'm going to go to France, and I'm going to take off for a while and I'm going to put like a Nash in charge or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did. I took my
99.
daughter. I took my daughter to Paris for 10 days.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it
My
was end
memory's
of
not that
98,
bad.
end of 98, beginning of 99 ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
No, but guys, a lot of that, I was frustrated with having to produce 2 primetime shows. Thunder was something I can't say there was a gun to my head, but there kind of was. I had to pay for it myself because nobody else wanted to. But Ted Turner wanted the show. So guess what that meant? That meant it got produced out of WCW's budget with no license fees. And it was a lot of additional work. And the stress that put on the production team manifested in a lot of mistakes, lack of communication. It was just because the workload doubled. And I oftentimes was frustrated at that, particularly when Turner Broadcasting was cutting my budget in the middle of the year, even though I was over delivering on projections. That kind of shit, had me in a bad mood a lot of the time in 1999. It wasn't because of production.
I found this fascinating. So Brandon Thurston had posted a chart from back in 98, 99, so back when. And it was showing the ratings year over year or month over month, and like all the numbers were like in the green for both for Raw, for WWE programming and our programming. And then like all that green stuff, then all of a sudden you saw, okay, now there's 2 new shows, Thunder and SmackDown. But there was so much positive ratings going into that. It's like, well, we need more programming. You look at the charts for like AEW, and there was like red, yellow, like going down, and then all of a sudden they wanted another show at Collision, and I was like, that's weird. It's like there's the trend,
right?
It's like completely different trend. What'd you think about that?
I mean, I said long before Tony even had a second show that if I were Tony, based on the shit that I went through, I would want to make sure my show, my foundation, is absolutely as strong as it can be before I added anything on top of that. It's no different than building a house. It's starting to put your walls up before you got your foundation in. The fucker's going to collapse eventually. You can keep building and you can keep throwing up walls and throw in some pummeling, throw in some electricity. But if your foundation isn't in the ground and isn't correct, eventually it's going to collapse. And when Tony, or I shouldn't say Tony's just doing what the network asked him to do, presumably. But for the network to want more shows when that foundational show is actually losing audience, and then you're asking your provider, your television partner, in this case, AEW, to produce more content, I don't know, man. I don't know that's that smart. We'll see. Maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe they wanted to see what AEW is capable of.
Do you know any people that are running Warner Brothers, the Warner Brothers Discovery? Do you know any of those people now that like you used to work with the executives back in the day, like the people in those positions now? Are you familiar with any of them?
I mean, I know David. I don't know him personally, but I know of David Zaslav, and I've done business at Discovery when David Zaslav was the head of the company. I may have interfaced with him, probably not. Maybe 10 years ago I did when he was more in program development, but I don't know any of them personally.
That's the thing, because I'm looking at this like we always look at it from the wrestling bubble, and I'm looking at, maybe these people running that network they're not clued in, like maybe they're not very good at what they're doing, because like you said, like you look at those trends and they want a new show, and like we're puzzled.
Yeah, but Konnan, there's a lot of things we don't know that's going on in the world of television, and probably strategies that wouldn't have made sense 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, certainly 20 or 30 years ago, that actually makes sense today, because television is getting killed. Television is going to be the rotary phone in the next 10 years. It's changing so rapidly. And because of that change and the pressure that change puts on networks, cable networks especially, they're willing to do things and try things that didn't make sense a couple of years ago. There's just so much going on that we don't know and don't understand.
Well, cable television programming stinks. I can't really name a show that I asked friends. I ask people, what do you watch on cable? And besides wrestling, I can't find anybody that watches anything on cable. Like the
It's
program
news.
you get,
It's news and sports primarily, but even a
that's
lot
it.
of that. You know,
Beyond that, I don't even consider that.
I can get that on my Roku.
Right. You know, so,
Right.
so it's like, you know, where everything's into the streaming now, and it's like maybe that's why wrestling, because it still gets solid numbers, because everybody brags at you, we're number one on cable this for the night. Like,
In the
okay,
demo.
the demo. Well, that's the thing. But I'm like, that's kind of like you're accepting the low standard of just being number one in a sea of like no competition. But like,
Yeah, you're the biggest small
Right.
fish in the little pond.
right, but your show is underperforming. And if you're just accepting like, okay, but we were number one on cable, but you're not addressing the reasons that you're underperforming, it's like the product, the fans are suffering from an underwhelming product, and they're just not watching it anymore. And I think if like the media, the wrestling media, was a little bit harder on them when they're not when they're underperforming, instead of kind of like celebrating little wins here and there that don't really mean anything in the big picture, that I think the product would be better for
Right.
them, you know?
Why would that pressure? Let's assume you're right. Why would the wrestling media, and the Twitter or social media universe that listens to them, why would them being negative about the product have any positive impact on it?
Well, because I see a guy like Tony when he's like, this is my dream, was becoming, celebrating getting Booker of the Year, and I'm like, dude, you've lost 25% of your audience from the time you guys have started, and like you're celebrating getting Booker of the Year, and like, that's not a good standard of success.
No,
You know what
I
I'm saying?
agree.
So I'm saying like, but everybody applauds that because that's all the dirt sheet community that he feeds into and stuff. And I'm just like, he just like seems like the type of guy that just likes to hear good things about his show.
Well,
And the
that
me
doesn't
and the
make
me,
him horrible,
no,
by the way.
but that's all they do. And when
I
you're,
get
but
it.
the show kind of suffers in the numbers. That's the way out. That's my perspective. So
No, I get it. I get frustrated with the way the show is covered by some people, not by all people. And look, fans, it's a little bit like politics, right? When AEW came out, there was such a rabid fan base. Everybody wanted to see us succeed. There was all this goodwill. They got over invested in it. They became tribal. And by the way, a lot of that is because of Tony Khan and a lot of the top talent in AEW, including our good friend Chris Jericho, who came out and started taking shots and saying things like, we're going to overtake WWE within the next 6 months. And they were constantly comparing themselves in a way and kind of talking down WWE. And that kind of, dribbled down into the internet wrestling audience, and everybody took a position. Well, now that things aren't going as well as everybody had hoped they would at the beginning, there's still people that just are going to defend no matter what. Reality doesn't matter. They're going to find something to hang on to and defend because they've staked out their position. They've made themselves known to be this ardent AEW supporter or ardent WWE promoter or fan. So they're going to camp out and they're going to look at all the good things to talk about and they're going to criticize the bad things that the other side does. It's just human nature, man.
And very, very good point, Eric, because it's almost like they were celebrating too early, almost like the cryptocurrency people or the NFT people. At the beginning, they were like, oh, this is great. And now we're seeing it wasn't. You know what I'm saying?
But there are some people, even in crypto, and I know some of them.
Right.
I know one of them very, very well, who are still, and they have the reasons for doing it, camped out on crypto. But I think politics, especially, people are, and I think the COVID, what's going to go back to COVID. I think, I see people, I was flying back from Philadelphia this past weekend, and I'm seeing all kinds of people wearing masks.
Right.
And not N95 masks, diaper masks, like the ones that everybody has come out and said
over their mouth
work.
With their nose hanging out too.
But they're so afraid, and they committed to believing and buying into the fear and buying into the propaganda of that time that they're not reading or learning or accepting any of the information that's out there right now. They're just not going to do it, no matter what's out there.
The dog's a recurring character on the show. They always do run-ins and stuff.
I thought I pissed off Konnan again. He's got up and left.
My dogs are fighting.
Yeah. But that's cool, Eric, because I listen. Conan doesn't really spend a lot of time listening to other stuff, but I always like you always provide good content on 83 Weeks of the Business, and I catch a good clip, of you, and I'm like, and I always tell Joe, let's get Eric on because I want to talk to him about this. Bro, honestly, I think in this whole picture right now of the podcasting and stuff thing, I look at you as like I think you're the smartest guy in the room because like well, just bro, your track record is very like trends that you've talked about, things that would happen in the future. It's like
Yeah, but
nearly
I've fucked some shit up. Come on, man.
Let me stop
you
right there.
always
Let
seem
me
like
just say, Eric.
Go ahead.
He seems to think. What was that show that you did with Scott Baio, Single and 45 or whatever it was?
Yeah, Scott Baio's 46 or 45 and 6.
Yeah, he thinks you're gonna do like a remake with him in it. So that's the reason why he's
I got the hair. I mean, like my hair's getting long.
See, I'm telling you.
Right. Oh my god.
But no, bro, we love having you on here because you're opinionated like we are. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You're not fucking in any way intimidated by the cancel culture, the snowflake society. Yes, we're all aware that words and things we shouldn't touch, and we're not going to go out of bounds just to fucking get heat for no reason and get deplatformed. But it's always a good, intelligent, civil discourse.
Well, thank you, Konnan. I always enjoy talking to you guys. I look forward to getting the text or email from Joe, and I'm usually going to be here anytime I'm invited. And just remember, heat is life. Nothing worse without it.
And before Eric goes, I do want to plug one thing for him because I said it the last time he was on how much I enjoyed his newer book, which is called Grateful by Eric Bischoff with Guy Evans. I said before too, I'd put it up there on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling books with Foley and JR and Jericho and guys like that. You can get it at GuyEvansBooks.com or Amazon. So, and I'm being honest and serious. It was phenomenal. Yeah, it was really good.
Appreciate that.
So
really good.
For a good read, go check out Grateful. I'm going to get it because I read a lot of books, and I'm going to read it and then bring you back on the show and ask you some questions from the book.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love that. I'd appreciate that opportunity.
All right. So say one more time where they can get it, Joe.
GuyEvansBooks.com and Amazon too, as well. So.
All right. So if you enjoy,
run, man. Thank you guys very much.
Viewpoints, check out the book. Thank you very much, Eric. Anything you need to Twitter or anything you want to plug before you get out here?
At eBischoff.
At eBischoff everywhere. All right. Be good, my friend.